The blood on Zelda Vincent's hands wasn't hers, and it wasn't from any crime she had committed. But the mob gathering outside the general store in Clifton, Arizona, didn't care about the truth. It was the spring of 1884, and the small mining town had grown restless after months of unexplained thefts and now a murder, and everyone needed someone to blame. Zelda pressed herself against the back wall of the store, her 22 years of life flashing before her eyes as angry voices swelled outside. She had been the one to find old Mr. Hutchinson lying in a pool of his own blood behind the mercantile, his cash box emptied and his skull cracked open. She had knelt beside him, felt for a pulse that wasn't there, and gotten his blood all over her dress and hands. Then Mrs. Patterson had come around the corner, saw Zelda covered in blood, and started screaming for help. Now half the town wanted to string her up without a trial. "She's been working at the store for months," someone shouted, "had access to everything, probably been stealing all along." "Hutchinson trusted her," another voice added, "made it easy for her to get close." Zelda's heart hammered in her chest. She had come to Clifton 6 months ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need for work. Mr. Hutchinson had been kind enough to give her a job when no one else would hire a woman traveling alone. He had been like a grandfather to her, teaching her the business, letting her sleep in the storage room until she could afford a room at the boarding house. The thought that anyone believed she could hurt him made her stomach turn. The front door of the store rattled as someone tested the lock. Zelda looked around frantically for another way out, but the only exit was through the front or the back door that led to the alley where she had found Mr. Hutchinson's body. She was trapped. "Zelda Vincent, you come out here right now," Marshal Crawford called. His voice carried the weight of authority but also something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear of the mob he was trying to control. "We just want to talk. Nobody's going to hurt you." She didn't believe that for a second. She had seen lynch mobs before back in Texas where she grew up. She knew how quickly talking could turn into hanging. The back door suddenly opened and Zelda jumped, pressing herself harder against the wall. A tall figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the harsh afternoon sun. For a moment, Zelda couldn't make out his features, but then he closed the door quietly behind him and she saw his face. Samuel Nash was new to Clifton, even newer than Zelda. He had arrived just 3 weeks ago, a cowboy looking for work at one of the nearby ranches. She had seen him around town, noticed how he carried himself with quiet confidence, how his dark eyes seemed to take in everything without judgment. He had come into the store a few times to buy supplies, always polite, always patient, never trying to flirt or make her uncomfortable like some of the other men did. "The alley is clear for now," Samuel said quietly, his voice low and steady. "But it won't be for long. They are searching everywhere." "I didn't do this," Zelda said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I found him like that. I was just trying to help." Samuel studied her for a long moment, and Zelda felt herself holding her breath. She needed someone, anyone, to believe her. His gaze dropped to her trembling, blood-stained hands, then back to her face. "I know," he said simply. Those 2 words hit Zelda like a wave of relief so strong her knees nearly buckled. "You do. I was riding past about an hour before you found him. Saw 2 men leaving through that back door, moving fast. Didn't think much of it at the time because people come and go from the store all day. But when I heard what happened, I remembered." Samuel moved closer, keeping his voice low. "One of them had a cash box under his arm." "Did you see their faces?" Zelda asked urgently, not clearly. "But I would recognize them by size and build. One was short and stocky, the other tall and thin. Both wore dark clothes." "You have to tell the marshal," Zelda said. "I tried. Crawford won't listen." Says I am too new to town to be a credible witness, and that my word against the evidence of you being found with the body isn't enough. Samuel's jaw tightened. He's more concerned with satisfying the mob than finding the truth. Then what am I supposed to do? Zelda could hear more voices joining the crowd outside. The situation was deteriorating by the minute. Samuel was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Then he said, "You need to get out of town. Hide somewhere until I can figure out who really did this. They will think I am running because I am guilty. They already think you are guilty. At least if you run, you will be alive." Samuel pulled off his duster and held it out to her. "Put this on. Cover your hair with this hat. If we move fast, I can get you to my horse." Zelda stared at the offered clothes, her mind racing. Running meant giving up any chance of a normal life in Clifton. But staying meant almost certain death. She had no family, no one to vouch for her character, no money for a lawyer even if Marshal Crawford would allow a trial. The front window shattered as someone threw a rock through it. Zelda flinched at the sound of breaking glass. "Now," Samuel said firmly. "Decide now." Zelda grabbed the duster and hat, pulling them on quickly. The coat smelled like leather and sage and something distinctly masculine. Samuel's hat was too big, but she tucked her honey blonde hair up under it as best she could. "Stay close to me," Samuel instructed. He opened the back door a crack, peered out, then motioned for her to follow. They slipped into the alley where Mr. Hutchinson's body had been covered with a tarp. Zelda forced herself not to look at it as they hurried past. Samuel led her down a series of back streets and alleys, moving with the confidence of someone who had memorized the town's layout despite his short time there. They could hear the mob breaking into the store behind them, angry shouts rising when they discovered she was gone. Samuel's horse was tied behind the livery stable, a sturdy chestnut gelding that stamped nervously as they approached. "Can you ride?" Samuel asked. "Yes." "Good." He untied the horse and swung into the saddle, then reached down to pull Zelda up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid strength of him, and then they were moving, the horse's hooves kicking up dust as they galloped out of town. They rode hard for over an hour, heading northeast into the rough country beyond Clifton. The late afternoon sun beat down on them, and Zelda could feel sweat trickling down her back beneath the heavy duster. She held tight to Samuel, acutely aware that this stranger was the only thing standing between her and a noose. Finally, Samuel slowed the horse as they entered a narrow canyon with steep red rock walls. A creek ran along the bottom, providing water and cover. He guided the horse into a sheltered area behind a large boulder and dismounted, then helped Zelda down. "We will rest here for a bit," he said. "Let the horse drink and catch his breath." Zelda's legs felt shaky as she stood on solid ground. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Samuel loosened the saddle on his horse and let the animal drink from the creek. "I saw those men leaving. I know you are innocent. That's enough. But you are risking your own neck now. They will say you helped a murderer escape. Let them say what they want." Samuel finally looked at her directly, and Zelda was struck by the intensity in his dark eyes. "My father was accused of a crime he didn't commit when I was 14. Horse theft. The town didn't wait for a trial. They hanged him from an oak tree while my mother and I watched. Later, they found out it was actually the sheriff's son who had been stealing horses. By then, it was too late." His voice was steady, but Zelda could hear the old pain beneath it. "I will not stand by and let that happen to someone else when I know the truth." "I am sorry," Zelda said softly. "About your father." Samuel just nodded, his throat working as he swallowed hard. Then he changed the subject. "Tell me about Mr. Hutchinson, who might have wanted to hurt him." Zelda sat down on a rock, grateful for the chance to think about something other than her terror. He was a good man, fair in his dealings. I never heard him fight with anyone. What about money? Did he keep much at the store? Some. Enough to make robbing him worthwhile, I suppose. But everyone in town knew he made a bank deposit every Friday afternoon. It's only Tuesday, so there wouldn't have been as much as later in the week. Maybe the thieves didn't know that, Samuel suggested. Or maybe they couldn't wait until Friday. Or maybe they wanted something else, Zelda said slowly, a thought forming. Mr. Hutchinson sometimes bought gold from prospectors who didn't want to deal with the assay office. He would resell it himself and take a small commission. He kept it in a safe in the back office. Was the safe open when you found him? Zelda closed her eyes, trying to remember details through the shock and horror. I think so. Yes, the door was hanging open. Then that's probably what they were really after. Gold is easier to hide and spend than cash from a known robbery. Samuel looked thoughtful. Do you know which prospectors he had been dealing with recently? A few. There's a man named Collins who comes in every couple of weeks, and the Murphy brothers, though I haven't seen them in a while. Mr. Hutchinson kept records of all his transactions in a ledger, which is probably still in the store, and we can't exactly walk back in and get it. Samuel rubbed his jaw, thinking, but someone in town must know about his gold dealing. It's the kind of thing people talk about. They fell silent for a while. Zelda used water from the creek to wash the dried blood off her hands, scrubbing until her skin was raw. The stains on her dress were harder to remove, dark reminders of the worst day of her life. "Where will I go?" she asked quietly. "I can't hide forever." "My boss, Mr. Thornton, owns a ranch about 10 miles north of here. He's a fair man, former Texas Ranger. If I explain the situation, he might let you stay there while I investigate in town." "And if he won't?" Samuel met her eyes. "Then I will figure something else out. But I am not going to let them hang you for something you didn't do." The conviction in his voice made something warm unfold in Zelda's chest. She barely knew this man, but he was fighting for her when everyone else had been ready to believe the worst. They rested for another half-hour, then rode on as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. The Thornton Ranch appeared as they crested a rise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with good grass and water. Cattle dotted the landscape, and Zelda could see cowboys working near the barn. A man stepped out of the ranch house as they approached, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent his life outdoors. "Samuel," the man said, his eyes moving from Samuel to Zelda with open curiosity. "Wasn't expecting you back until tomorrow. Mr. Thornton, I need to talk to you about something urgent." Samuel dismounted and helped Zelda down. "This is Miss Zelda Vincent. She's in trouble." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "What kind of trouble?" Samuel explained the situation quickly and clearly, including what he had seen before the murder and why he believed Zelda was innocent. Thornton listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Samuel finished, Thornton was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are asking me to harbor a fugitive. That's serious business." "I am asking you to protect an innocent woman while I find the real killers," Samuel replied. "You know me, sir. You know I wouldn't bring her here if I didn't believe she was telling the truth. I have only known you 3 weeks, son. Then you have only known me long enough to know I don't lie." Thornton's lips twitched in what might have been the start of a smile. "That's true enough." He turned his attention to Zelda. "You have anyone who can vouch for your character, miss?" "No, sir," Zelda said honestly. "My parents died when I was 19. I have been on my own since then. Mr. Hutchinson was the first person in a long time who showed me any kindness. And yet you are accused of killing him." "I didn't," Zelda said firmly, meeting Thornton's eyes. "I cared about him. He gave me a chance when I needed one. I would never have hurt him." Thornton studied her for another long moment, then sighed. "My daughter is about your age. If she was in your situation, I would hope someone would help her." He gestured toward the house. "You can stay in the spare room, but you stay out of sight. I can't have my men knowing about this. Most of them spend time in Clifton, and I can't risk word getting back." "Thank you," Zelda breathed, relief flooding through her. "Don't thank me yet. If Samuel can't prove your innocence, there's only so much I can do." Thornton looked at Samuel. "You really think you can figure out who did this?" "I am going to try," Samuel said. "Those two men I saw, someone in town knows them. I just have to ask the right questions. Be careful. Crawford might not be the best lawman, but he won't take kindly to you interfering in his case." "I will be careful." Thornton called for his wife, a kind-faced woman named Martha, who took one look at Zelda's blood-stained dress and haunted eyes and immediately went into mothering mode. She led Zelda into the house, clucking sympathetically and promising a hot bath and clean clothes. Samuel stayed behind with Thornton. "I need to borrow a horse," he said. "I am going back to town tonight." "Tonight? You just got here. At least rest and eat something." "Every hour that passes, the trail gets colder. I need to talk to people while memories are still fresh." Thornton shook his head. "You are either very brave or very stupid, and I haven't figured out which yet." But he went to the barn and came back with a fresh horse. "This is Dusty. He's fast and he's smart. Take care of him." "I will." Samuel swung into the saddle, then hesitated. "Mr. Thornton, if something happens to me, will you make sure Miss Vincent gets away safely?" "Nothing is going to happen to you," Thornton said firmly. "But yes, if it comes to that, I will help her. You have my word." Samuel nodded and turned the horse toward town. As he rode away, he couldn't help but glance back at the ranch house. Somewhere inside, Zelda was probably getting her first moment of peace since this nightmare began. He barely knew her, but something about her had struck him from the first time he had seen her in Hutchinson's store. She had a quiet dignity despite her obvious poverty, a gentle way with customers, and a smile that could light up the whole room. He had been working up the courage to actually talk to her beyond the necessities of buying supplies, and then this had happened. Now he was her only hope. He just hoped he was worthy of the trust she was placing in him. The ride back to Clifton took longer in the dark, but Samuel used the time to think. He needed to be smart about this. Asking too many direct questions would make people suspicious. He needed to be subtle, to listen more than he talked. The town was quieter when he arrived, though he could see lights burning in the saloon and hear the tinny sound of piano music. He tied Dusty outside and pushed through the swinging doors. The saloon fell silent as soon as he entered. Every eye in the place turned to look at him. Samuel felt the weight of their stares but kept his expression neutral as he walked to the bar. "Whiskey," he told the bartender, a balding man named Pete. Pete poured the drink slowly, his movements careful. "Heard you helped that murdering woman escape," he said conversationally. "That true?" "I helped an innocent woman avoid being lynched by a mob," Samuel replied, taking a sip of the whiskey. "It burned going down. There's a difference. Crawford is looking for you. Talking about charging you as an accomplice. Then it's a good thing I am here in plain sight instead of hiding." Samuel turned to face the room, leaning back against the bar. "Any of you actually see what happened to Hutchinson? Or are you all just going along with what Crawford says?" "She was found with the body," someone called out, "covered in his blood." "Because she found him and tried to help," Samuel said. "That doesn't make her a killer." "Then who did it?" another man asked. "If you are so sure she's innocent, that's what I intend to find out." Samuel's eyes scanned the crowd, looking for men who matched the description of who he had seen. Short and stocky, tall and thin. There were a few possibilities, but in a mining town that described half the population. "You are wasting your time," Pete said. "Crawford already has his killer." "Crawford has a convenient scapegoat," Samuel corrected. "He has someone the town will accept blaming because she's a woman alone with no family to defend her. But the real killers are still out there, probably laughing at how easy it was." That caused some muttering. Samuel could see doubt creeping into a few faces. Good. Doubt was better than certainty. A man stood up from a corner table, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. He was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothes. Samuel's pulse quickened. "You got a lot of nerve coming in here and making accusations," the man said. His voice was rough, aggressive. "Maybe you are the one who killed Hutchinson. Maybe you are protecting the girl because you are in it together." "What's your name?" Samuel asked calmly. "Jack Brennan." "Why?" "Just wondering. You seem awfully interested in shutting down any talk that might lead to finding the real killer. Makes a man wonder why." Brennan's face flushed red. "You calling me a murderer?" "I am saying the real killer would want everyone to stop asking questions. Would want to make sure some innocent woman takes the blame so he can get away clean." Samuel took another sip of whiskey, never taking his eyes off Brennan. "Kind of like what you are doing right now." Brennan's hand moved toward his gun. The saloon erupted in shouts, some men jumping up from their seats. Samuel set his whiskey down carefully, his own hand hovering near his weapon. "That's enough." Marshal Crawford pushed through the crowd, his star glinting in the lamplight. He was a heavy man in his 40s with thinning hair and a perpetually annoyed expression. "Brennan, sit down. Nash, you are coming with me." "Am I under arrest?" Samuel asked. "Should you be?" Crawford shot back. "I helped an innocent woman escape a lynch mob." "If that's a crime, then yes, arrest me. Otherwise, I am not going anywhere." Crawford's jaw worked as he ground his teeth. "You obstructed justice. I prevented murder. Again, there's a difference. You don't know she's innocent, and you don't know she's guilty. But you were ready to let that mob hang her without a trial, without any investigation." Samuel straightened up, meeting Crawford's eyes directly. "I saw two men leaving the back of Hutchinson's store about an hour before the body was found. One was carrying a cash box. I tried to tell you this before, but you weren't interested." "Because I already had my killer," Crawford said. "The Vincent woman." "No, you had your convenient suspect. The real killers are still walking free." Crawford looked around the saloon, clearly aware that everyone was listening. His authority was being challenged publicly, and he didn't like it. "Fine. Describe these men you supposedly saw, one short and stocky, one tall and thin, both in dark clothes. They moved fast like they were in a hurry." "That could be anyone," Crawford scoffed. "It could be," Samuel agreed. "But it's a starting point, unless you would rather not investigate." "I know how to do my job, Nash." "Then do it. Question people. Find out who has been spending more money than usual. Check if anyone has been trying to sell gold. Actually investigate instead of just grabbing the easiest target." Crawford's face was turning purple. "You are on thin ice, Cowboy." "I am on solid ground, Marshal. I am trying to help you find the real killer before you make a mistake you can't take back." "Where's the girl?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere she won't be murdered before she gets a fair trial." "You are obstructing justice." "I am ensuring justice. When you have actual evidence against her, not just circumstantial appearance at the scene, then we can talk about a trial. Until then, she stays hidden." Crawford looked like he wanted to argue more, but the crowd was watching. Some faces showed support for Samuel, others confusion. The absolute certainty that had driven the mob earlier was cracking. "I will find her," Crawford promised. "And when I do, you will be charged right alongside her." "Good luck with that," Samuel said calmly. Crawford stormed out of the saloon, and slowly the normal noise level returned. Samuel finished his whiskey and ordered another. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but he kept them steady. Pete leaned across the bar. "You really think she's innocent?" he asked quietly. "I know she is. Hutchinson was a good man. Whoever killed him deserves to hang. I agree completely. That's why I want to make sure we hang the right person." Pete nodded slowly. "For what it is worth, I never really believed it was the girl. She always seemed sweet, shy, not the killing type." "Did Hutchinson have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted him dead?" Pete thought for a moment. "Not that I know of. He was well liked, but there was some talk a few weeks back." "What kind of talk?" "Some prospectors got into an argument at the assay office. Something about someone trying to pass off low-quality gold as high grade. Hutchinson sometimes bought gold directly from miners, so maybe he was involved somehow." "You remember any names?" "Not off the top of my head, but the assayer might. Fellow named Gibbons has an office on Main Street." "Thanks." Samuel left some coins on the bar and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard the conversation starting up again, and he knew his confrontation with Crawford would be the talk of the town by morning. The assay office was dark, but Samuel could see a light burning in the living quarters above it. He knocked on the side door and waited. After a few minutes, a thin man in a nightshirt opened the door a crack. "Whatever it is, it can wait until morning," Gibbons said irritably. "This is about Hutchinson's murder." Gibbons's attitude shifted immediately. "What about it?" "I heard there was some trouble a few weeks ago, an argument about gold quality." "Who told you that?" "Does it matter? I am trying to find out who really killed Hutchinson." Gibbons studied Samuel for a moment, then sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in, but make it quick." Samuel followed him upstairs to a cluttered office filled with scales, testing equipment, and samples of ore. Gibbons lit a lamp and sat down behind his desk. "The argument was between me and a prospector named Dawson," Gibbons explained. "He brought in what he claimed was high-grade ore from his claim, but when I tested it, it was mostly worthless rock with just enough gold mixed in to fool an amateur." "You think he was trying to cheat you?" "I think he had been cheated himself. Someone probably sold him a claim they said was rich with gold, but it was worthless. He was trying to recoup his losses by passing off bad ore." Gibbons shrugged. "It happens. Prospecting makes men desperate. What does this have to do with Hutchinson?" "Dawson was angry when I wouldn't pay him for the ore. He left, and I heard later that he went to Hutchinson's store. Hutchinson sometimes bought gold, but he wasn't as careful about testing it as I am. I went over to warn him and found Dawson trying to sell him the same bad ore." "What happened?" "Hutchinson refused to buy it once I explained the situation. Dawson got angry, started yelling about how everyone in town was trying to cheat him. Hutchinson threw him out." Gibbons leaned forward. "Here's the thing, though. Dawson said something that stuck with me. He said Hutchinson would regret crossing him, that he knew Hutchinson kept gold in that store and one day he would take what was owed to him." Samuel's pulse quickened. "Where can I find Dawson?" "He has a claim about 5 miles east of town, but he's not the only one who might have had a grudge. His partner, a man named Sullivan, was with him during the argument. The two of them together could have done it. Sullivan is short and built like a bull. Dawson is tall and thin as a rail." That matched the description of the men Samuel had seen. "They still in town. I saw them yesterday. They have been staying at the boarding house on 2nd Street. Samuel stood. "Thank you, this is helpful." "You really think the Vincent girl is innocent?" Gibbons asked. "I know she is. Crawford won't like you proving him wrong. Crawford can deal with it. I am more concerned with making sure an innocent woman doesn't hang." Samuel left the assay office and headed for the boarding house. It was late, but not so late that everyone would be asleep. The boarding house was a two-story building with a front porch where some of the residents sat smoking in the evening. Samuel climbed the steps and knocked on the door. The landlady, a formidable woman named Mrs. Chen, answered. "We are full up," she said immediately. "I am not looking for a room. I am looking for two men, Dawson and Sullivan." "What do you want with them?" "Just want to ask some questions." Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "This about Hutchinson, it might be. They left this afternoon, packed up quick and rode out without paying their last week's rent." She sounded annoyed about that. Said they were heading to Tucson. This afternoon, right after the murder, right after. I thought it was strange, but figured maybe they just didn't want to stick around with all the excitement. Or maybe they were running because they knew their crime would eventually catch up to them. "Do you know which way they went?" "South, I assume, if they were heading to Tucson." Samuel thanked her and headed back to the livery stable. He needed to get back to the ranch and figure out his next move. If Dawson and Sullivan were running, they were likely the killers. But proving it would be harder. He needed evidence, not just suspicion. The ride back to the Thornton ranch seemed longer than before. Samuel's mind was racing, piecing together what he knew. Two prospectors with a grudge and matching descriptions had left town right after the murder. That couldn't be a coincidence. But would Crawford accept that as evidence? Probably not, especially since it would mean admitting he had been wrong about Zelda. It was past midnight when Samuel reached the ranch. Most of the buildings were dark, but he saw a light burning in the main house. As he approached, the door opened and Zelda stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a clean dress that must have belonged to Mrs. Thornton, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, gleaming in the lamplight. The blood was gone, but Samuel could still see the strain of the day in her face. "I heard the horse," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what might have happened to you in town." "I am fine," Samuel assured her, dismounting. "And I think I found our killers." Zelda's breath caught. "Who?" Samuel explained what he had learned from Gibbons and Mrs. Chen. As he talked, he saw hope dawning in Zelda's eyes mixed with fear. "But they are gone now," she said when he finished. "How will we prove I am innocent if they are in Tucson?" "We go after them. We find them and bring them back to face justice. Crawford will never let you bring them back. He has already decided I am guilty. Then we make sure we have evidence he can't ignore. We find the gold they stole, get them to confess, whatever it takes." Zelda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am coming with you. That's too dangerous. If someone recognizes you before we can prove your innocence, you could be arrested, or worse. And if I stay here, I am completely dependent on you. If something happens to you, I have no way to defend myself." Zelda's chin lifted stubbornly. "Mr. Hutchinson was my friend. I want to help catch the men who killed him." Samuel wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She had been through hell today, accused of a terrible crime, forced to run for her life. But she wasn't broken. She was angry and scared, but also strong. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this carefully. And if I say you need to hide or run, you do it. No arguments. Agreed?" They stood there on the porch, the night quiet around them except for the chirping of crickets and the distant sound of cattle. Samuel realized how close they were standing, close enough that he could see the flecks of green in her hazel eyes, close enough to smell the lavender soap she must have used in her bath. "Thank you," Zelda said softly, "for believing me, for helping me when you had no reason to." "I had every reason to," Samuel replied. "I saw the truth and I couldn't ignore it. Most people would have. It would have been easier to just look the other way. I am not most people." Zelda smiled for the first time since this nightmare began, a small tentative thing that made Samuel's heart skip a beat. "No," she said, "you are definitely not." They left at first light the next morning. Mr. Thornton had provided supplies, a horse for Zelda, and grudging approval for their plan. Mrs. Thornton had packed food and fussed over them like they were her own children heading off on a dangerous journey. The trail to Tucson would take several days, but Samuel was hoping to catch up with Dawson and Sullivan before they got that far. Two men traveling together would be easier to track than a single rider, and they had a several-hour head start but not a whole day. They rode steadily south, stopping occasionally to ask at ranches and way stations if anyone had seen two men matching the description. By late afternoon, they had confirmed that Dawson and Sullivan were indeed ahead of them on the trail to Tucson. They stopped at the Miller Ranch around noon to water their horses, the ranch hand told them. Seemed in a hurry, didn't stay long. How far ahead are they? Samuel asked. Maybe 3-4 hours. You planning to catch up to them? Something like that. The ranch hand looked at Zelda curiously, taking in her borrowed dress and the hat she wore pulled low to hide her face. You folks be careful. Those two looked like trouble. They rode on as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. Samuel wanted to push through the night, but the horses needed rest, and so did they. They made camp in a sheltered spot off the trail, building a small fire to heat some of the food Mrs. Thornton had packed. Tell me about yourself, Zelda said as they ate. I know so little about you, yet you are risking everything to help me. Samuel was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Not much to tell. I grew up in Texas. After my father died, my mother and I moved around a lot. She passed about 2 years ago. Since then, I have been drifting, working ranches, trying to figure out where I belong. No other family, no siblings. My mother's family disowned her when she married my father, said he was beneath her. Samuel's voice was bitter. They didn't even come to her funeral. I am sorry. What about you? Samuel asked, wanting to change the subject. How did you end up in Clifton? My parents had a small farm in Texas. They both caught fever 3 years ago and died within days of each other. The bank took the farm and I had nothing. I worked whatever jobs I could find, but it was hard for a woman alone. Men either wanted to take advantage or wouldn't hire me at all because I might get married and leave. Zelda poked at the fire with a stick. I heard Arizona had opportunities, so I came west. Clifton was the first place I found work. Mr. Hutchinson didn't care that I was a woman. He just cared that I was willing to work hard and learn the business. Sounds like he was a good man. He was. He used to tell me stories about when he first came west, about building the store from nothing. He said I reminded him of himself when he was young, determined. Zelda's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I wish I had been there earlier. Maybe I could have stopped it. Or maybe you would be dead too, Samuel said gently. You can't blame yourself for what happened. I keep thinking if I had just worked faster, finished my errands sooner, maybe I would have scared them off before they hurt him. Samuel reached across the fire and took her hand. The only people responsible for Mr. Hutchinson's death are the men who killed him, not you, never you. Zelda's fingers tightened around his. How are you so certain? You barely know me. For all you know, I could actually be a murderer. You are not. Samuel said it with absolute conviction. I may not have known you long, but I know people. I know character. And I know you couldn't have done this. They sat in silence for a while, hands still clasped across the fire. Samuel was acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment, the fact that they were alone under the stars with nothing but each other for protection and comfort. Finally, Zelda pulled her hand back gently. We should get some rest. Tomorrow might be difficult. You sleep first. I will take the first watch. Wake me halfway through the night. You need rest too. Samuel agreed, and Zelda lay down near the fire, using her saddle as a pillow. She fell asleep quickly, exhaustion claiming her. Samuel watched over her, his rifle across his knees, and thought about how much his life had changed in just one day. Yesterday morning, he had been a drifter cowboy with no real ties or purpose. Now he was hunting murderers and protecting a woman who made his heart race every time she looked at him. It was crazy and dangerous and probably the most foolish thing he had ever done, but it also felt right in a way nothing had since his father died. They caught up to Dawson and Sullivan late the next afternoon. Samuel spotted them watering their horses at a creek about a mile ahead. He pulled Zelda behind some rocks and they dismounted, watching the two men carefully. "That's them," Samuel confirmed, recognizing the body types from his brief glimpse that day in Clifton. "Short and stocky, tall and thin." "What do we do?" Zelda whispered. "We need to get close enough to hear what they are saying. If they talk about the murder or the gold, that would be evidence." They tied their horses and crept closer on foot, using the terrain for cover. Dawson and Sullivan were arguing about something, their voices carrying in the quiet afternoon. "I told you we should have waited," Sullivan was saying. His voice was rough, angry. "Another few days and Hutchinson would have had more gold. Now all we got is what was in the safe and we had to kill him for it." "He recognized us," Dawson replied. His voice was higher, defensive. "What was I supposed to do? We couldn't leave him alive to identify us." "You panicked." "You always panic." "At least I did something. You just stood there like a scared rabbit." "I was watching the door like we planned. You were supposed to grab the gold and get out. But no, you had to crack his skull open." Samuel and Zelda exchanged glances. This was exactly the confession they needed. But they still had to get Dawson and Sullivan back to Clifton, and that would be the difficult part. "Now we got that cowboy and the marshal both looking for us," Sullivan continued. "Should have just let them hang the girl and been done with it." "They will hang her," Dawson said confidently. "Nash can talk all he wants, but Crawford already made up his mind. She was there, covered in blood, open and shut case. I hope you are right, because if they catch us, we are dead men." Samuel stood up from behind the rock, his gun drawn. "You are already dead men," he said coldly. "You just don't know it yet." Dawson and Sullivan spun around, their hands reaching for their weapons, but Samuel was faster. "Don't," he warned. "I will shoot you both before you clear leather." "Who the hell are you?" Sullivan demanded. "The cowboy you were just talking about. The one who saw you leaving Hutchinson's store with the cash box." Dawson's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." "I just heard you confess to murder. That's plenty of proof." "Your word against ours," Dawson said, but his voice lacked conviction. Zelda stepped out from behind the rock and both men's eyes widened. "Miss Vincent," Sullivan breathed, "they said you were on the run." "I was running from a lynch mob, not from justice," Zelda said firmly. "You two killed a good man and tried to let me hang for it." "We didn't mean for him to die," Sullivan said quickly. "It was an accident." "You cracked his skull open," Zelda said, her voice shaking with anger. "How is that an accident?" he fought back. "We just wanted the gold. He should have just given it to us." "So it's his fault you killed him." Samuel's voice was heavy with disgust. "You are going back to Clifton to face justice. Both of you drop your gun belts, slowly." Dawson and Sullivan exchanged glances, clearly trying to decide if they had any chance of fighting their way out. Samuel cocked his revolver, the click loud in the quiet afternoon. "Don't make me kill you," Samuel said, "but I will if I have to." Slowly, reluctantly, both men unbuckled their gun belts and let them drop to the ground. Samuel moved forward and kicked the weapons away, then made both men lie face down while he tied their hands behind their backs. "You will never make it back to Clifton," Dawson said as Samuel hauled him to his feet. "Crawford wants to hang the girl. He won't thank you for proving him wrong." "I don't care what Crawford wants. I care about the truth." They rode through the night, Samuel leading the way with Dawson and Sullivan's horses tied to his saddle. The two prisoners were bound and gagged, preventing them from calling for help or trying to talk their way out of the situation. Zelda rode behind, her rifle ready in case either man tried to escape. By dawn, they were within sight of Clifton. Samuel could see smoke rising from chimneys as the town woke up. He felt a grim satisfaction. They had done it. They had caught the real killers and could prove Zelda's innocence. But Dawson had been right about one thing. Crawford wasn't going to be happy. They rode straight down Main Street, drawing stares and whispers from early morning townsfolk. Samuel headed directly for the marshal's office and dismounted, pulling Dawson and Sullivan down from their horses. Crawford emerged from his office, coffee in hand, and stopped dead when he saw Samuel. His eyes moved from Samuel to the prisoners to Zelda, and his face turned red. "What the hell is this?" Crawford demanded. "This is Hutchinson's real killers," Samuel said, pushing Dawson and Sullivan forward. "They confessed. I have a witness." "The Vincent girl doesn't count as a witness. She's biased." "Then get a judge to sort it out. But these are your men, Marshal, not her." A crowd was gathering, drawn by the commotion. Samuel saw Pete from the saloon, Gibbons the assayer, Mrs. Chen from the boarding house. More and more people were coming to see what was happening. Crawford looked around at the crowd, clearly aware that he was losing control of the situation. "All right," he said finally. "Bring them inside. We will sort this out." "Not without protection for Miss Vincent," Samuel said firmly. "She comes inside too, and no one touches her until the truth comes out. I could arrest her right now. You could try." Samuel's hand rested on his gun. "But I don't think you want to do that in front of all these witnesses." Crawford's jaw worked furiously, but he nodded. "Fine. Everyone inside." They crowded into the marshal's office. Crawford took his seat behind his desk while Samuel positioned himself between Zelda and the door. Dawson and Sullivan stood bound in the center of the room. "Talk," Crawford said to the prisoners. "What's Nash claiming you did?" "We didn't do nothing," Dawson said immediately. "He jumped us on the trail, accused us of murder. It's a lie." "I heard them confessing," Samuel said. "They were talking about killing Hutchinson, about the gold they stole from his safe. They even said they were glad you were planning to hang Miss Vincent because it meant they would get away with it." "That's a lie," Sullivan shouted. "Check their saddlebags," Samuel suggested. "I bet you will find Hutchinson's gold." Crawford hesitated, then gestured to his deputy, a young man named Miller who had been standing quietly in the corner. "Check their horses." Miller went outside and returned a few minutes later carrying 2 heavy saddlebags. He opened them on Crawford's desk, and gold nuggets spilled out, gleaming in the morning light. "Where did you get this?" Crawford demanded, staring at the gold. "We prospected it," Dawson said quickly. "It's from our claim." "Then you won't mind if I verify that with Mr. Gibbons," Crawford said. He sent Miller to fetch the assayer. Gibbons arrived within minutes, took one look at the gold and shook his head. "This isn't from any claim near here. This is high-quality ore, the kind Hutchinson dealt in. I recognize some of these pieces. I tested them for him just last week." Crawford turned back to Dawson and Sullivan. "Want to change your story?" Sullivan broke first. "It was Dawson's idea," he said desperately. "I just went along. I didn't know he was going to kill anyone. It was supposed to be a simple robbery." "Shut up," Dawson snarled. "No, I won't shut up. I am not hanging for your stupidity." Sullivan turned to Crawford. "We went to the store to steal the gold. Hutchinson caught us. Dawson panicked and hit him with a crowbar. We took the gold and ran." "That's the truth." "It's not the truth," Dawson said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I saw you leaving," Samuel added. "About an hour before Miss Vincent found the body. One of you was carrying a cash box." Crawford sat back in his chair, his face a mixture of anger and resignation. "So the girl is innocent?" "Yes," Samuel said firmly. She's innocent, she always was. Crawford was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and looked at Zelda. Miss Vincent, I owe you an apology. I should have investigated more thoroughly before making accusations. You have been wronged, and I am sorry. Zelda's eyes were shining with tears, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Thank you, Marshal. I appreciate that. Dawson, Sullivan, you are under arrest for the murder of John Hutchinson. Deputy Miller locked them up. As Miller led the prisoners away, the tension in the room finally broke. Samuel felt the adrenaline that had been keeping him going drain away, leaving him exhausted. But they had done it. Zelda was free. The real killers were caught. Justice had been served. The crowd outside erupted in talk as word spread through town. Some people looked ashamed, remembering how quickly they had been ready to condemn an innocent woman. Others just seemed relieved that the real killers had been caught. Zelda turned to Samuel, and before he could react, she threw her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for believing in me. Samuel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She fit perfectly against him, and he realized that somewhere during this crazy, dangerous journey, he had fallen completely in love with her. The trial was held 2 weeks later. Judge Morrison came down from Prescott, and the whole town turned out to watch. Dawson and Sullivan were convicted based on Samuel's testimony, the evidence of the stolen gold and Sullivan's confession. They were sentenced to hang. Zelda testified about finding Mr. Hutchinson's body, about her terror when the mob formed, about running for her life. The judge apologized to her on behalf of the town and officially cleared her of all charges. In the weeks following the trial, life in Clifton slowly returned to normal. But everything had changed for Zelda and Samuel. Mr. Thornton offered Samuel a permanent position as foreman on his ranch, impressed by the young cowboy's integrity and determination. Samuel accepted, grateful to finally have a place to call home. Zelda inherited Mr. Hutchinson's store. He had never married, had no children, and his will left everything to Miss Zelda Vincent, who showed me kindness and worked with dedication. The store came with the building, the inventory, and enough money to keep it running. Zelda was overwhelmed by the inheritance, but determined to honor Mr. Hutchinson's memory by running the store with the same fairness and kindness he had shown. The town, guilty over how quickly they had turned on her, went out of their way to support her business. Samuel helped her in the evenings after finishing his work at the ranch. They would go over the books together, restock shelves, and talk about everything and nothing. Their friendship deepened into something more, though neither of them had quite found the courage to speak the words out loud. One evening, about a month after the trial, they were closing up the store together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Samuel was putting away some tools while Zelda swept the floor. Samuel, Zelda said suddenly, stopping her sweeping. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really help me that day? I know you said you saw the real killers, and I know about your father, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? Samuel set down the hammer he was holding and turned to face her. What do you mean? I mean that plenty of men have seen injustice and done nothing. You risked your life, your reputation, everything to help someone you barely knew. Why? Samuel was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. Do you remember the first time I came into the store? He asked finally. Zelda thought back. You needed supplies for the ranch, rope and nails and some other things. I also needed hope, Samuel said softly. I had been drifting for 2 years, working jobs that meant nothing, living in places that weren't home. I was starting to think maybe that's all life was. Just moving from one empty place to another. He took a step closer to her. Then I walked into this store and you smiled at me, not the kind of smile you give customers to be polite, a real smile. and you helped me find what I needed, and you asked how I was settling into town, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone actually saw me." Zelda's breath caught. "Samuel, when I heard what happened, when I heard they were accusing you of murder, it felt like someone was trying to destroy something good and pure in the world. And I couldn't let that happen. Even if you never spoke to me again, even if you didn't feel the same way I did, I had to help you because you deserved to be saved." "The same way you feel," Zelda whispered. "What do you mean?" Samuel closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I mean that I am in love with you, Zelda Vincent. I think I have been since that first smile, and if that scares you or makes things complicated, I understand. But you asked for the truth, and that's the truth." Zelda's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "It doesn't scare me," she said. "It makes me happy. Because I love you too, Samuel Nash. You are the bravest, kindest, most stubborn man I have ever met, and I love you with everything I am." Samuel kissed her then, gentle and sweet, pouring everything he felt into it. Zelda kissed him back, her arms coming up around his neck, the broom clattering forgotten to the floor. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Zelda laughed softly. "I never thought I would find something good in all this horror." "Sometimes the best things come from the worst situations," Samuel said. "My father used to say that. I never really understood it until now." They stood there in the empty store, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. Outside, Clifton went about its business, unaware that 2 of its residents had just found something worth more than gold. 3 months later, in the small church on the edge of town, Zelda Vincent married Samuel Nash. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton stood up as witnesses, and half the town attended, wanting to show their support for the couple who had reminded them of the importance of truth and justice. Zelda wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Thornton had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Samuel had picked that morning. Samuel wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, his hands shaking slightly as he slipped a simple gold band on Zelda's finger. "I promise to always believe in you," Samuel said during the vows. "To always fight for you, to always love you with everything I have." "I promise to stand beside you," Zelda replied, her voice strong and clear. "To build a life with you, to love you through whatever challenges we face." They sealed their promises with a kiss, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Thornton Ranch, with food and dancing and celebration. Pete from the saloon played fiddle, and people danced under the stars. Samuel and Zelda were pulled into countless conversations, accepting congratulations and well wishes. At one point, Marshall Crawford approached them, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say again how sorry I am," he told Zelda, "for not believing you, for not investigating properly. You deserved better." "Thank you, Marshall," Zelda said graciously. "What matters is that justice was served in the end." Crawford nodded and moved away, still looking ashamed. Samuel pulled Zelda close. "You are more forgiving than I would be," he murmured. "He made a mistake, but he owned up to it. That takes courage." Zelda smiled up at her new husband. "Besides, I am too happy right now to hold grudges." They danced together as the moon rose, slow and close, lost in their own world. Samuel marveled at how much had changed in just a few months. He had gone from a lonely drifter to a married man with a home, a job, and a purpose. All because he had chosen to believe in someone when no one else would. "What are you thinking about?" Zelda asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "How lucky I am. How different my life could have been if I hadn't ridden past Hutchinson's store that day. Or if you had ignored what you saw and kept riding. I could never have done that, not when I knew the truth." Zelda pulled back to look at him. "That's what I love about you, your sense of justice, Your inability to stand by when something is wrong. My stubbornness, you mean, Samuel said with a grin. That too. Zelda kissed him softly. Thank you for being stubborn. Thank you for fighting for me. Always, Samuel promised, for the rest of our lives. They moved into the apartment above the store, making it their home. Samuel continued working at the Thornton Ranch during the day, while Zelda ran the store. In the evenings, they would have dinner together, talking about their days, making plans for the future. Life wasn't always easy. Running a business was hard work, and there were always challenges. Some people in town still viewed Zelda with suspicion, unable to completely let go of their initial judgment. But most had come to respect her integrity and business sense. Samuel proved to be an excellent foreman, earning the respect of the ranch hands and increasing the productivity of the Thornton Ranch. Mr. Thornton treated him like a son, and Samuel finally had the father figure he had been missing since his own father's death. A year after their wedding, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after closing the store, her hands trembling as she placed his palm on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, her eyes searching his face for his reaction. Samuel's face lit up with pure joy. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "I am more than happy. I am blessed." Samuel set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working so hard? We should hire someone to help in the store." Zelda laughed. "I am pregnant, not fragile. But yes, hiring help would be good. The store is doing well enough that we can afford it." They hired a young woman named Sarah Miller, the marshal's niece, to help in the store. Sarah was eager to learn and had a head for numbers. With her help, Zelda was able to reduce her hours as her pregnancy progressed. The months passed peacefully. Samuel became increasingly protective, worrying over every little thing. Zelda found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am not made of glass," she told him one evening when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, but I can't help it. You are carrying our child. I want to make sure you are both safe." "We are safe. We are healthy. Stop worrying so much." But Samuel couldn't help it. After nearly losing her once, the thought of anything happening to her or their baby terrified him. In late autumn, as the leaves turned gold and red, Zelda went into labor. Mrs. Thornton and the town midwife attended her, while Samuel paced outside the bedroom, nearly wearing a hole in the floor. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Every time Zelda cried out, Samuel flinched as if he had been struck. He felt helpless, unable to do anything to ease her pain. Finally, just as the sun was rising, he heard a new sound. The sharp, angry cry of a newborn baby. Samuel's heart leaped into his throat. "Mrs. Thornton opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, loud son, and Zelda is fine. Exhausted, but fine." Samuel pushed past her into the room. Zelda was propped up in bed, pale and sweaty, but smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Samuel approached slowly, almost afraid to get too close. "Come meet your son," Zelda said softly. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He was red-faced and wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Samuel felt his eyes burn with tears. "He's perfect," Samuel whispered. "He looks like you," Zelda said. "He has your nose." "Poor kid," Samuel joked weakly, unable to look away from his son. "I was thinking we could name him John," Zelda said. "After Mr. Hutchinson, if that's all right with you." Samuel looked up at her, seeing the mixture of love and grief in her eyes. Mr. Hutchinson had given Zelda a chance when she needed it most. Naming their son after him seemed right. "John Samuel Nash," Samuel said. "It's perfect." Zelda smiled and shifted the baby so Samuel could hold him. Samuel took his son carefully, terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong. But the baby settled against his chest, his crying quieting. "Hello, John," Samuel murmured. "I am your father, and I promise you I will always protect you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always believe in you no matter what anyone else says. That's my vow to you." The baby yawned, completely unimpressed by his father's speech. Zelda laughed softly. "I think he's ready to sleep." They settled together as a family, Samuel sitting on the bed with his wife and son, watching the sunrise through the window. It was a perfect moment, peaceful and full of hope. The years passed, and John grew from a baby into a curious, active toddler. He had his father's dark hair and stubborn streak, and his mother's kind heart and quick smile. Samuel and Zelda watched him explore the world with wonder and pride. The store continued to thrive. Zelda had expanded the inventory and improved the bookkeeping, making it one of the most successful businesses in Clifton. She had also started a lending library in one corner of the store, providing books to anyone in town who wanted to read. It had become a popular gathering place, especially for women and children. Samuel had been promoted to ranch manager, overseeing all of the Thornton operations. He had a talent for managing both cattle and people, and the ranch prospered under his leadership. When John was 3 years old, Zelda became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Ruth Martha Nash, after Samuel's mother and Mrs. Thornton. Ruth was a calm baby, the complete opposite of her boisterous older brother. She had blonde hair like her mother and Samuel's dark eyes, and she seemed content to simply watch the world go by. "We are outnumbered now," Samuel joked one evening as he held Ruth while John raced around the living room. "Good thing we are both tough," Zelda replied, catching John and tickling him until he dissolved into giggles. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The store, the ranch, the children, the steady accumulation of ordinary days that made up a life. Samuel and Zelda had found what they were both looking for: a home, a purpose, a family. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, they would sit together and talk about everything that had happened. About how a single moment of choosing to help someone had changed both their lives completely. "Do you ever regret it?" Zelda asked once. "If you hadn't helped me, your life would have been simpler. You wouldn't have had to hunt down killers or confront the marshal or risk everything." "No," Samuel said without hesitation. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. You are worth everything, Zelda. You and our children, this life we have built. It's more than I ever dreamed of having." "I love you," Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I don't say it enough, but I love you so much. You saved my life in every way that matters." "And you saved mine," Samuel replied. "You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a reason to put down roots. You gave me a family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the window, holding hands the way they had that first night by the campfire when they had been running for their lives. Years continued to pass. John grew into a responsible young man who helped in the store and showed an aptitude for business. Ruth was quieter but equally bright, with a love for books that rivaled her mother's. Samuel's hair started to gray at the temples, and Zelda developed fine lines around her eyes. But to Samuel, she was just as beautiful as the day he first saw her smile. They faced challenges over the years: droughts that threatened the ranch, economic downturns that hurt the store, illnesses and injuries that came with life. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other. Marshall Crawford retired and moved to Hutchinson to live with his daughter. Before he left, he stopped by the store to say goodbye. "I never properly thanked you both," he told Samuel and Zelda, "for teaching me what real justice looks like. I was lazy and prejudiced, and I nearly let an innocent woman hang. You taught me to be better, to look deeper, to never assume." He shook Samuel's hand firmly. "Thank you for being the kind of man who stands up for what is right, even when it's hard." After he left, Zelda slipped her hand into Samuel's. "You changed this town," she said. "You made people think about how they treat others, about the importance of truth." "We changed it together," Samuel corrected. "You showed them strength and grace. You showed them that a woman alone can build a successful business and be respected." The Thornton Ranch eventually passed to Samuel after Mr. Thornton died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. Samuel had been managing it for years, but now it was officially his. He renamed it the Nash Ranch, but kept the high standards and fair treatment of workers that Thornton had established. Mrs. Thornton continued to live in the main house until she passed, 5 years later. Samuel and Zelda had cared for her in her final years, grateful for all she had done for them. She died holding Zelda's hand, whispering that she had always thought of her as the daughter she never had. John married at 22, choosing a kind young woman named Emma who worked as a school teacher. They took over running the store, allowing Zelda to finally retire and enjoy her grandchildren. Ruth showed no interest in marriage, instead becoming a teacher herself and eventually opening a school for girls in Clifton. Samuel and Zelda supported her completely, proud of her independence and dedication to education. Samuel and Zelda moved to a small house on the ranch property, close enough to be involved but far enough to have their own space. They spent their days reading, gardening, and watching their grandchildren grow. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Zelda back to the canyon where they had hidden that first night. They were older now, moving slower, but the canyon looked the same. The creek still ran clear, the red rocks still glowed in the afternoon sun. "You remember being here?" Samuel asked, sitting on the same rock where they had rested all those years ago. "Of course," Zelda said, sitting beside him. "I was terrified. I thought my life was over. Then you appeared and gave me hope." "I was terrified too," Samuel admitted. "I had no idea if I could actually help you, but I knew I had to try." "You did more than try. You saved me. You believed in me when no one else would." Zelda took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of 3 decades together. "You gave me everything. A home, a family, a life I never dreamed possible." "We gave each other everything," Samuel said. "That day I chose to help you was the day I chose my own life too. My real life. The one that mattered." They sat in the canyon until the sun began to set, painting the rocks in shades of gold and orange. Two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. As they rode back to the ranch, Zelda looked at her husband, seeing the boy he had been and the man he had become. His hair was mostly gray now, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held the same fierce determination that had made him stand up to an entire town to protect her. "I love you, Samuel Nash," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you, Zelda Nash," Samuel replied. "My wife, my partner, my heart. Thank you for 30 years of happiness." "Here is to 30 more," Zelda said. "At least," Samuel agreed. They rode home together in the fading light. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love story that would be remembered in Clifton for generations to come. A story about justice and courage, about believing in someone when the whole world called you a fool, about fighting for what was right even when it cost you everything. But most of all, it was a story about love. The kind of love that saw past accusations and fear to the truth beneath. The kind of love that stood strong against mobs and prejudice. The kind of love that built families and futures out of impossible situations. Samuel and Zelda Nash lived out their days surrounded by children and grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that their lives had mattered, that they had made a difference, that their love had been worth fighting for. And when they were very old, sitting on the porch of their little house watching the sunset, they would sometimes talk about that day in Clifton when their lives had changed forever. The day Zelda had been accused of a crime she didn't commit, and a cowboy she barely knew had believed her and fought an entire town to save her. "You think it was fate?" Zelda asked once. "That you rode past the store at exactly the right moment to see the real killers?" "Maybe," Samuel said. "Or maybe it was just luck. But either way, I am grateful for it every single day." "So am I," Zelda said, reaching for his hand. "So am I." They lived to see their great-grandchildren born, to see Clifton grow from a rough mining town into a thriving community. They saw automobiles arrive and electricity light up the streets. They saw the Old West fade into memory, replaced by a modern world they barely recognized. But through all the changes, one thing remained constant: their love for each other, as strong and true as the day Samuel had first taken Zelda's blood-stained hand and promised to prove her innocence. Samuel died first, at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Zelda beside him. His last words were, "Thank you for the best life a man could ask for." Zelda held his hand until the end, tears streaming down her face, but also smiling because she knew how lucky they had been. How many people got to experience a love like theirs? How many people found their perfect partner, their soulmate, their greatest adventure? She lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her family, still sharp and engaged with the world. She spent her days writing down the story of her life, of Samuel's courage, of the town that had almost killed her but ultimately became her home. When she finally passed, also peacefully in her sleep at the age of 81, her children found the manuscript on her desk. The full story of that terrible, wonderful day in 1884, when a young woman was accused of murder, and a brave cowboy chose to believe in her innocence. They published it as a small book, distributed throughout Clifton and the surrounding areas. It became a local legend, a reminder of the importance of truth and justice, of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. The Nash family continued to thrive in Clifton for generations. The store remained in the family for over a century. The ranch prospered and expanded. And every child born into the Nash family heard the story of their great-great-grandparents, of how love and courage had saved an innocent woman and changed an entire town. In the Clifton Cemetery, 2 headstones sit side by side under a large oak tree. They read simply, Samuel Nash, 1862, 1940, beloved husband, father, and friend, he stood for justice. Zelda Nash, 1862, 1943, beloved wife, mother, and friend, she never lost hope, but the people of Clifton knew there should have been more written. About how Samuel had risked everything to save an innocent woman. About how Zelda had survived false accusations and mob violence to build a successful life. About how their love story had started in tragedy but ended in triumph. About how sometimes, in the darkest moments, one person choosing to believe can change everything. The story of Samuel and Zelda Nash became part of Clifton's history, told and retold, embellished and remembered. A true story of the Wild West, when justice was often swift and sometimes wrong, but when the right person stood up, truth could still prevail. And in the end, that was the legacy they left behind. Not just the businesses they built or the family they raised, but the example they set. That love was worth fighting for. That truth mattered more than convenience. That one person standing alone could make a difference. Samuel had fought a town to save Zelda, and in doing so had saved himself. He had found his purpose, his home, his reason for living. And Zelda had survived the worst moment of her life to find the best, a partnership built on trust and respect, and the kind of love that only deepened with time. Their story ended not with dramatic confrontations or desperate escapes, but with quiet evenings on a porch, grandchildren playing in the yard, and two people who had found everything they needed in each other. It was the kind of ending they both deserved. The kind of ending they had fought so hard to achieve. The kind of ending that proved against all odds that sometimes justice prevails, love conquers, and the right choices, no matter how difficult, lead to the most beautiful destinations. The sun set over Clifton, Arizona, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, just as it had done every night since the town was founded. And somewhere, in the warmth of that fading light, the story of Samuel and Zelda Nash lived on, a testament to courage, love, and the unshakable belief that truth will always find its way into the light.